All right, now, the as we affectionately know it, the Project Sputnik that has been around for 10 years now, I think. And
Yep.
I think I was gonna suggest right at the opening here that Barton, I think it's time that you consider sponsorships. So, what kind of sponsor? What would be? Let's workshop this. What would be your ideal sponsor? Are we gonna go to the delicious, refreshing sugar waters?
I would
Maybe
go
we're gonna
SUV on the side.
furnitures.
I want to go NASCAR with this. I
Okay,
think,
okay. So
I,
multiple.
yeah, no, I think that would go well. Red Bull gives you Linux. I don't know. I'm thinking of rewriting that
How
one.
about those spray cans with compressed air that you used to clean computers? Maybe one of those.
That would be a great brand.
Yeah, yeah. It could be called the spray dust spray.
Project Spray Dust.
Yeah, when you were a kid, did you spray those too, and like it would turn into ice?
No, but thank you.
That's a tip for you that you can use.
I will.
Well, so I thought we would record a nice episode here because it has been. I don't know if it's to the day because I don't know when exactly we'll
It was the
release this.
29th of November
Ah,
was
yes.
the launch, and so what are we out? What are we out now? So it's a little bit less than 2 weeks.
So it's over 10 years old,
Yeah.
essentially, is what you have there. But why don't you tell people what it is? What is it that is over 10 years old now, Barton?
So the actual date is November 29th is the date that the XPS 13 Developer Edition, which back in the day was based on Ubuntu 12.04 and was based on the obviously the XPS 13. That's when it became available in the US and Canada on that date. So we had started planning it 9 months before, which actually, as I say, it's from PowerPoint to launch was about 9 months. So it went pretty quickly for your project, and so that was the actual date that it came out. And as I said, it was a laptop targeted at developers, and
And
is now
and
it's in its 12th generation too.
running Canonical's Ubuntu, if I recall, right?
Yeah, that's the
Ubuntu.
12.04, right?
Yes, and is that called something like Lucky Lad? What's it must have some fun
Oh
name like
man,
that.
I forget what that one was.
We'll have to look that. I saw a hilarious article that it was hilarious because it said it opened up after 10 years. The Dell developer laptop finally supports like 22.04. And then I went and looked up when 22.04 was released, and it was released in like spring of 2022. So this whole like after 10 years, it's finally gotten support for this was a little odd.
Well,
Maybe it was like
that's kind of weird.
certified support or something, but it was maybe they're using one of these new fancy AI things to write headlines for it. But
Exactly. What I think what that was is that the way the certification works is so you're working to get the system out, you're enabling it, and it's a long lead time. And sometimes you get lucky with when the long-term support version comes out.
mm,
This is where you get unlucky in that we've been working on it. Long-term support comes out in April, which is these '04 number at the end. And we came out, I can't remember exactly what it was. We probably came out a little bit after that. So it looks like, well, geez, the new one is available. Why aren't you doing that? But there's a long lead time to get that. So what we did is we went back and recertified it. And so that actually got quite a bit of news. Just the fact that we had now upgraded it so that it'll come straight from the factory with 2204. Once again, the nomenclature is that 22, or the nomenclature is 22 is the year, and the '04 is the release
oh,
month,
that's
and it's
clever.
always April. So that's how you
That's
can
smart.
decode it. So we
Yes.
launched with 2004. So sorry, 2012. Okay, all right, stop. All right, we we launched with 1204. So
Yes.
okay, using the new rubric I taught you, what year was that operating system? Did it come out?
That would be 2012.
Yes, and what month?
April.
Wow. I think my work here is done.
It's fun fact about me. It's only in the last few years that I can kind of quickly tell you March, April, and May by numbers. Those are the most confusing number months for me historically. I think the rest of them I can kind of feel my way around, but sometimes I forget September is in there,
What's the
right?
M's that you get mixed up, right? You say because they're both MA, March and May. And so I always have
Yeah,
to stop and pause and see which one
that's
is the
true.
third one and which is the fifth one.
And
So you
I
would not
gotta,
do well in Japanese because it's all the months are just the numbers. So number one, number two month, you know what I mean?
oh yeah, and the other thing for me is I feel like March is after April. I don't know why, and then May is just like that's a mystery month. I don't know why that's there. May and September are these 2 months in the calendar that I feel like they just pass me by. I don't know what's up with them.
Right. Then you get into Roman emperors, right? So August, and then you skip it with September. That's why you're confused. Then you get
That's true.
October, okay, November, December. Okay, is there just Julius Octavius? All right, I'm missing somebody in there. But anyway,
Uh,
that's the Roman calendar, I guess.
so let me bring us back here from the Roman calendar because
Yes.
what have they done for us when it comes to Linux desktops? I mean, I think I would
Lately.
summarize it that you this is basically a Linux desktop that y'all at Dell have, and sure, it's targeted at developers because they like Linux desktops. But if you wanted to find a Linux desktop from a major manufacturer that you can just order off the website, this is it. And it's nice to have a large, powerful brick of might. I think y'all also have. I always forget what's the name of the beefier line of laptops.
Precision.
The
And
precision.
so
So
there's the precision mobile workstations, the precision fixed workstations.
right,
And
right.
so both of those. So one thing I should say is that what's the what was different about Project Sputnik wasn't that it was necessarily Linux enabled on a Dell system. It was Linux enabled on a high-end Dell system. Because
Exactly.
we'd been selling Linux on lower end systems, specifically Ubuntu, and so it hits a certain market that's looking for more of a value type of an offering, and so that worked really well. What was the very the part that left people scratching their heads internally was why would you take our top end system and put a free OS on it? Who would buy that?
Mm,
So that's where it comes in is how would you then, because you had the systems that were running it weren't quite as sexy as the XPS 13, which was really good looking and continues to stay so. So that was the difference. And so how do we get together with Canonical to work with the third party device manufacturers to get all the device drivers written for this high end system?
So and to add to that, right? So back when you were working on this, 2011, 2012, probably that's like I think this was right at the beginning. Is it right at the beginning? It was like kind of midway. No, I guess this was a while ago. Like at the beginning of essentially the big shift of developers going from like ThinkPads as the premier Cadillac of laptops to basically Macs as the premier Cadillac thing.
That actually happened before, and that's one of the things this was a reaction to was the fact
Exactly.
that people had said, you know what, I don't want to be working with futzing with drivers. This is a pain, and I also would like a powerful OS. I'm not going to use Windows, and I'm going to go to something that's got a BSD, a Unix type base, a Linux type base, which would be the Mac OS, right? So you've got
And
the OS, plus you've got the fact that it just works, and so maybe you're a free software person, but you think, well, I'd rather just have something that works, and I'll uh, I'll turn a blind eye to that. Or there's people who are sort of more less religious about it. So that's what happened, and that's what this is one of the things this was a reaction to.
and then I think the insight, the kind of strategic insight that you and other people had working on this over the years, or at the beginning, was basically like, and developers will pay a premium for like a good integrated laptop, right? Like they're not just because they're using Linux on it, and just because they're developers doesn't mean they're just going to go for the cheap, powerful option. They'll actually pay, and this is what was confusing, and I guess maybe not so much, but sometimes confuses people about developers and buying expensive laptops. Is sometimes you buy an expensive laptop and it actually costs more than buying, so to speak, a cheaper one that would be more powerful, right? And so
Wait, say
like
that again.
well, you could spend the same amount of money for a fancy laptop,
Right.
and then you could buy like a much more powerful laptop, but it's not so fancy, right?
Okay.
And
Right.
and
So you're
often
paying for looks. You're paying for
Right. And oftentimes, I mean, I would say many developers, I mean, they're humans. They're not some strange creature. They like nice things. And so that to your point, right? Like that's the whole deal. Is like it's not just, any laptop, just a workhorse laptop. It's a nice one. And so
Well, and
like
I think that was, that was it. Is you, as you say, they transition over, talking about transition over to Macs, and those actually look good. Those weren't the big Soviet style bricks that people had been using before. And so with the XPS 13, now you've got something that actually is good looking, like a Mac Air, or better, depending on your aesthetic. But it puts something, so when you're going to your conferences, you're not sheepishly looking at your own laptop compared to, that's as I said, one of these bigger ones, compared to the Macs that other people might be using. So that was, and those are pricey. So that right there is an example of why people are willing to pay for high end laptops, for developers would be willing to pay for that.
and now like we were saying, it's been around for over 10 years, by which we mean 10 years and 2 weeks to
As a
begin.
publicly available project, but it started 9 months before that as an idea, just keeping the timeline
And
straight.
and so like I mean obviously I mean how would you like what's the kind of like success that it's had? Give us a sense of like the magnitude of it, or like I don't know. Like obviously it has been successful, otherwise it wouldn't be around. But like what where does it ship to? Like how's that been
Well,
going?
yeah, so the beginning was, first it was one config, and you were there at the early days, and you remember my original pitch was, let's make this. So this was enabled, as you know, by an innovation fund. You were on that fund,
Mm,
or on the committee, and the idea that I had is, let's do the Beauty and the Beast lineup. Let's have the XPS 13, but let's also have a precision, and let's have multiple configurations. And I think cooler heads prevailed and convinced me that, hey, let's just go out with one configuration, one system. So that's where we started. We picked the highest end configuration, but as we've gone, we've we've got multiple configurations. I don't know how many we have now, maybe probably over 15 for the XPS 13. And as I mentioned before, it's in its 12th generation, so it's kept going. We then added the M3800 precision workstation. So back in the day, there was just one precision mobile workstation, and the story there is that we didn't have the resources to support another system, and a lot of people wanted it. So if you remember, Jared Dominguez, who was actually not even on the client side of the house, he was on the server engineering side working on Linux, but was really passionate about this. So he was working on the team. He took an M3800 home, and he got Ubuntu up and running. And then when he did that, he then posted a blog to Dell's technical blog platform saying, hey, here's the step-by-step instructions to get it running. And people really liked that, but they wanted more. So we did get help from the workstation group, and that became an official product the next year. That then, a few years later, the one product, the one precision mobile workstation, was replaced by a lineup of four. So those joined the fold. And then now that's on its seventh generation, and now we've got the fixed workstations as well. So as I say, it goes from one system, one configuration, to multiple generations of it, multiple configurations, plus a whole nother different line of, hey, how are you?
you want to say hi?
Hi.
All right.
You've
Now,
gotten bigger.
yes. It's always good to have a reason to edit. Bye.
So yeah, so it's grown in, as I said, generations, as well as number of products in the portfolio. And the other thing that's been that's a testament to how well it's done is we are now looking to grow it. So as Dell in general is putting more and more behind developers. So as you know, you spent some time here. At one point, that really wasn't a focus of Dell's. It was much more on the operator side. And as DevOps have come up, the company has realized that alongside operations, developers too are very important in this new ecosystem. And so we had 10 years ago, we started with the developer edition, and now we've got in other parts of the house, we've got products that are being designed with developers in mind while we're doing this. So it's now become a point of design whether we're talking about servers, solutions, storage, um, across the company. That's now a consideration. And we've also just started the developer relations team. So once again, if you're going to provide solutions for developers that they can use, you need to have that input. So we've been hiring developer relations, uh, developer advocates from the outside, bringing them in, and they're, as developer advocates do, they work between the company and the developers, representing the developers' needs back to the company, so that those needs are encapsulated in products, and that developers get what they need, and we can better serve our customers. In this case, being the community. So, as I said, the whole thing is growing. The portfolio is growing. I think in the very beginning, the idea that I pitched was, reason why we're doing this is not to make money. We don't want to lose money, but that's not the point. The point is to change views of Dell, particularly with developers, and have them look at what we're doing and saying, hey, Dell kind of gets it, given the influence of developers. And so that's what we've done. And we really have had, um, we have, we have gotten a group of folks that have become very passionate about the developer edition, and in that respect, it has become a hit, and we continue to grow it.
So you have this 10-year time span of like, up to you're saying like we're now, we have like a actually like, we're doing a lot more about like developers and like, so how like thinking through that 10 years, like what did it take to get to that point? Like, like, cause when I was there back from 2010 to 2011, I mean, as you were saying, there was this kind of interest in developers, but it didn't seem to like, aside from the Sputnik thing, like materialize into much. Like it was always a little like, I don't know. There was some lack of connection between the two. Like everyone, values developers, but
Fair statement.
I think over that 10 years, there's been more of, like what's it been like the process of sort of like coming around to like, here's not only are developers like, important, but here's our understanding of what they do and how it links to what it is we do as a organization. And then equally importantly, like the thing that is difficult to figure out for like a non-application developer organization is like, well, here's what we can do that they find helpful, right? Like having as we kind of discussed, having a factory shippable like high-end Linux laptop is helpful for developers because they will tell you they want that. but beyond that, like how do you find out how else you can be helpful to developers to the extent that now you have budget and a team of people and all this stuff, 10 years later?
Well, so I think if to the first part of it, how did it start gaining traction within the company? It came within the package of DevOps, right? So as DevOps rose, you've got developers, you've got operations. Operations we knew and have been focusing on. We realized that it's not just that, it's the two together. So we need to start, when we look at our portfolio of products, we need to look at how we make those products appealing to developers. So as you say, one of the ways that you do it is by getting developer advocates who go and start talking with people. The other thing is you become part of the open source community. And so right now, as has been happening for a while, you don't have just hardware by itself. Software is a huge component of it. Say, for example, in the case of storage, Kubernetes itself doesn't come with hooks into storage. And so you need to make those yourself. And so there's things called, there's CSI and there's CSM. So CSI are container storage interfaces, and that allows you to connect storage. I'm oversimplifying this, but connect storage to Kubernetes. And then CSM are additional modules you can put around your storage that that offer increased functionality. So that's just an example of, as we go forward, you really need to be looking at developers, looking at what types of software offerings need to be attached to really work in a modern ecosystem. They're not standalone. So that
Huh.
it's through DevOps, and then as we look forward, as I said, there really isn't an option, hasn't been for a little while, where you can ignore developers. You need to be thinking about what can you put together that supports operations, but also supports developers in how they might be using the product. And maybe say in the case of Kubernetes, it's not directly they who will be working with it, but they will be they're the ones who are going to be using it.
The
They're not going to be
beneficiaries of
managing,
it.
standing it up. And so you have to look at it and say, what are their needs going to be?
Now,
Right.
this is since you have direct experience with both of these things. So, from what you were saying, right? Like we could derive a theory here, which is that like the interest in Kubernetes has become so great that that you need to like change the way some infrastructure software works. Like you were saying, your storage. I don't know about this stuff myself, but your storage drivers and integration and things like that, right? And of course Dell has like compute and networking and storage, right? So like the fundamentals that you need to run anything, and all the stuff that connects it all together. So if you have Kubernetes come along, basically you need to ensure that like those three things work with Kubernetes in an easy way, that you can run Kubernetes on top of it. And then that implies, as I think we've seen, that developers will be running their applications on top of it, and they might be involved in driving like selection of hardware based on its compatibility with Kubernetes. Or, it would just be nice if it works well, even if the selection isn't driven by it. Now, how would you compare that? Was that same thing happening with like OpenStack? Because that was like a similar thing where it's like, if we're all going to be running OpenStack, which certainly in 2009 and 2010 seemed like the thing, it's going to take over, then it would have the same effect of driving, like we need this compatibility with OpenStack, and everything should work with it.
So now I'm trying to cast my memory back to that, because I do remember we actually was at the initial pre-public meeting where it was Dell, Rackspace, and NASA. And of course now it's OpenStack is focused on the telecom area and is doing really well in that area. I think that the things are a bit different. I haven't really thought about how you might compare them. And they too had projects within projects, say like Cinder for the storage part, et cetera. But this is a bit different in that it is plugging into the broader ecosystem where OpenStack, and this is, if my memory serves me well, is that OpenStack was, I won't say a component, it was a big component, but it would be part of a system, how it would fit in there, as opposed to how do we make all of our different components part of a bigger solution.
Yeah, well, maybe you're helping me flesh out a theory that I'm always thinking of, or I was thinking a lot about recently, which is, let's see, because OpenStack basically would run VMs, if I remember. It didn't really like run containers so much; it was just VMs it would run, which is fine. But maybe whenever the application architecture changes, that leaks all the way down to like the infrastructure needing to change. And so the thing with OpenStack is it's still basically running in VMs, and you don't necessarily have to change your application architecture too much. Like storage is a little different, things like that, but you could run applications on OpenStack that you could just run on like virtualized infrastructure, like, I think. Whereas if you look at like the way that containerized applications, which nowadays mostly means Kubernetes, like that, and you don't have to change the architecture of your application, but more than likely, because it's container based, you're going to change the way your application is architected, which I think means then you have to go through this intermixing of the developer or the people right below the developers, the platform teams building out stuff that developers use. They seem to be a lot more involved in like I don't know. It seems to drive a lot more change in the infrastructure space. They need different
Which is
tools and
this?
different types of
Which
software.
drives more change?
Oh, just when you like if you change the application architecture around, like it kind of leaks down, it drips down the stack. And so the infrastructure at the bottom needs to change a lot more. Whereas like if you're just doing the same application architectures, you don't really need to change how the infrastructure works. I don't know. I got to work on that theory, Barton. It's not very
Well, I
good.
think it's a bit apples and oranges. That's what I was trying to explain before, but I don't know if I'm doing a good job. But if we think in broadest brush strokes, I think you would talk about OpenStack as a platform, right?
Yes.
Sort of more analogous to a Tanzu or an OpenShift. So it is a component of the broader landscape. What, as you talk about that application architecture coming together, you need to have a platform that represents new architectures. And I think while OpenStack did end up taking on some of the containers and talking and bringing Kubernetes support, I think it was being sort of re-architected for that. Whereas, well, I was going to say OpenShift itself was re-architected, but it was done early enough that they almost reinvented it to take advantage of and to make the Kubernetes support and the container support there from the beginning, because they had gone their own way and had their own types of containers to begin with. So I think as we look at the landscape now, you have platforms, like we said, examples being Tanzu, being OpenShift. That's part of the overall environment that we need to plug in and to help support. And so with that, you have things, like I said, in the case of storage, you have these connectors that you need to write just because Kubernetes doesn't come with them. You write them, and then they're open source, so we have them in GitHub repos for others to take. And then you have the additional modules along it. So it's how do we plug what we have into a bigger solution? And then another thing that we are focusing on is how do we take our customer base, which a lot are starting to get into DevOps or maybe are halfway through it. How do we help them then along the way to better understand it, to better take a step back and figure out how you want to architect this as a whole, these new concepts? Because for the beginning, for most of our customer base, it has been the sysadmins. And those are the people who now have to reinvent themselves as platform engineers, infrastructure developers. The names, different people use different names, and they need a whole new skill set. So that's another part that we're working on, is how do we help those people reinvent themselves? And by definitions, they are a success if they help application developers become a success. So if they make the application developers heroes, then they themselves have succeeded. And so we may be working right now with, in certain cases, with the ops side of the house, but by definition, we are making things that have to be consumed in the end by developers. And then there's more direct ways that we work with developers, like as I said, like the XPS 13 Developer Edition, which is something that's actually used. Well, it's used by operations as well, but developers to work with. And so sometimes it's more direct, and sometimes it's sort of like when I worked at Johnson and Johnson and we sold oral care, toothpaste and toothbrushes. You're selling to the consumer, but really you're selling into Target or Walmart. So you have to think of, when you're designing your products, you're thinking of the end customers, but you're not selling to them. You're selling to the big box stores. Does that if that
Your
helps?
partners. Now
Yeah.
of course now that
So
does that
in
gets
this model, the operations folks are the Targets and the Walmarts,
and
and
you're the toothbrush.
no, yeah, that's, well, kind of. We build toothbrushes, but the ultimate people would be those who brush their teeth.
Okay, so the teeth are the customers.
In a way, yes.
Teeth are like containers. I think they contain
They
roots.
contain enamel.
Yes, enamel. Well, so that kind of raises something I was also curious about is I remember a little bit about this. Like I was only there a little bit of the time when this finally started shipping. But like, what are some of the over the last 10 years some of the discoveries about like if you want to manufacture and maintain and sell and support a laptop globally, there must be all sorts of exciting little things you discover that you need to do that people don't think about, right? Like
You think you're
as
talking specifically on the developer because
yeah, yeah,
we have
yeah.
the XPS 13 that comes with Windows, obviously, and then
Yes.
we have the one with Ubuntu, the developer one, and
Well, and you know, I mean, it's kind of like a laptop in general, but because you are, you know, like because you've been adding, because of you added a new type of thing, right? Like you, I assume, got to re-experience all of that over again, right? Like adding a new product line to it, and like you know, things are, you know, you hit a few hiccups and things that need to happen. Like this is not a direct example, but I remember we went to a meeting once about this laptop, and there was just a room full of people. They all seemed delightful. It was often a much nicer building than we worked in, and I remember we were waiting for our turn to talk, and but before that, there was like a 15-minute discussion about which stickers were going to be on the palm rest.
oh gosh, I very much do remember
Yeah,
that meeting.
and
Right, it was
and
a
and
product meeting, and
yeah, and it was like this delightful discovery of like, oh, well, of course, there's lots of meetings about which stickers go where, right? And it wasn't just motivated by, you know, what a cynical person would think, like payment and stuff like that. It was kind of like, well, you know, the size of this sticker next to this one, and you got to do this. So it was like this very thought out and occasionally kind of strongly debated discussion about the stickers to have on the palm rest, right? So, and I remember another instance, right? Like, I don't know, you got to make sure that you have a skew or something. Like, there's all this stuff that you have to do, which I think is useful background for people who, like, you know, are just like, I don't know, just put Linux on it and ship it, right? Like, what's the big
yeah,
deal? But like, there's all, especially as you sell globally, there's like all these things that come up that are like you would never realize. But it's kind of fascinating to hear what those things are.
yeah. I think there's two parts to the project. Is there's the be nimble, agile, be a tiger team, which another example I give is when in the early days when I worked with Namdi, who was Michael Dell's chief of staff and the executive sponsor for this. When I'd have product check-ins, I would take a piece of just regular white 8 by 10 sheet of paper, and I would just sketch out, here's the issues, here's where we need help, this is the status. Um, and he really enjoyed those. So we would go through that as opposed to going through a long PowerPoint with numbers, et cetera. So
Mm.
that's an example where you can be agile. Where you can't be agile is where on the side of the part that you're talking about is, I'll say you can't be agile, but you have to follow processes. So you need to be a success, you have to plug into the Dell machine because that's really where you get all your oomph from, right? So Sputnik was not going to go ahead and make our own website, our own product numbers, et cetera. So we have to go to, say, the meetings that you're talking about. And if we have something special that we want to get permission for or acceptance of, then you make your case and it gets approved or not. But as you say, you need to put it on a website. And to do that, you need order numbers, you need the back end process because you need to fulfill those orders. You need to have available in different countries. So you need to have different keyboards for it. And you need to be able to support it. In the case of Ubuntu, obviously there's the drivers, and that was the main thing that we were doing. But in actually getting a product out and getting it available for sale on that day, there's tons of teams that you work with. As I said, our team was a scrappy, small one, but the other folks were there and were part of bigger teams, part of the general infrastructure that Dell needs or any large company needs to get a product out and to the consumers. So
Yeah, no, and you know, it's good, especially since it's sort of like a developer centric thing, right? Like most software developers don't spend time thinking about building and shipping physical things, right? And let alone intricate physical things like computers. So there's a lot that goes into it. Now over the 10 years, like does it like get easier because now you become normal, like
Yeah,
part of the regular process.
I would say definitely. I think I'm just writing the blog for the 10th anniversary, and all these memories and nightmares come back. As I said, like the first few years, I slept with one eye open because what would happen is somebody new would hear about it, some director, and would say, "Why are we wasting this our resources on this? It's a niche market. Might as well be selling to orthodontists if we want to go after niche markets." And then they would look to pull resources, um, and we made it through that period, and then there was actually a period at sort of the 3 year mark where it wasn't Sputnik specifically, but Dell was looking at rationalizing the product, so putting money behind a fewer number of configurations, and it looked like Dell would, sorry, the Sputnik, the developer editions would get caught up in this, and we wouldn't make it. And so, I thought at that point, I thought, well, you know what, 3 years, we've made it, we've done a pretty good job. Let's pat ourselves in the back and call it a day. And for some reason, I do not know why, uh, we survived that cut. And so from there, it gets easier and easier. I think the other thing too is you build up a community, and that helps you to keep going because you've got these folks who are enthusiastic, who are giving you input into the product. It helps you to get word of mouth, of course, is huge. And so you start building up a bigger and bigger community that helps to support you. People understand, you start making more money. As I said, the goal wasn't to make money, but we were actually making a lot of money, which is a good thing. And so I think that's the community. In fact, if you cast your mind back to that initial meeting when I pitched the idea, I remember Matt Baker, who's now our head of strategy for all of Dell Technologies. When I pitched the idea, said, "Well, what stops one of our competitors from doing the same thing?" Right? How they could just go and write drivers for open source, or get their device driver manufacturers to write open source drivers. And I said, really, there isn't, but it's about building the community behind it to support it. And so I think that has been a huge part. And
Hmm.
so we're now at a place. The other thing that's helping to support it is, as I said, this movement of the company in general to realize the value of developers within the uh, modern IT environment. And so we are starting to put money around it, and this is now seen as a great component that we've already started working with and looking then to integrate into our bigger offerings. So, for example, you can run microcates on it. Microcates being Canonical's version of their small mini Kubernetes distro that you can run on your laptop to develop on and then push to the cloud. So things like that connect the two together. And we're also looking now with this new emphasis of what can we do on the client side of the house to expand this. So we're looking, at this point, in brainstorming phase on our side. So anything is up for debate. So do we go into new developer markets? Do we pull in new peripherals? Do we look at other Dell systems that we could developerize? And as I said, we're in the brainstorming phase, but just like Project Sputnik itself, we would like to come out when we get things a little bit clearer and come out to the community and say, hey, this is some of the things we're thinking about. Which of these do you think would be most interesting to you? And what would be the way that what would we need to do to these to actually give you the most benefit? Because I think that's one thing when you're talking about Linux or open source, it's really important that you give the developers, give the community a voice into this. Um, so I think that is all of this is starting that momentum to keep us going, that keeps growing going forward. So it has gotten easier, thank goodness.
Well, I just maybe here's a buzzword compliant thing you can pursue. Maybe what you should look into is you wanna have some digital twins for potential data centers that run on Dell, right? So you put digital twins that run on your developer laptops here, so that your developers and your platform developers can
Okay.
simulate what a data center would look like where they run stuff. Then you can say, You got that slide that says digital twins, which I think
No, I like that. I
I
think that's the type of thing, and we're looking at when you talk about on the precision side, the workstation side. In fact, we've got um, ones that are targeted at data science as part of the portfolio, AI, ML, and so that would be where you could be looking at your digital twins.
now that's
Um,
the kind of thing like if there's a picture on the slide, there's going to be like binary on my face, right? And I'm going to be reaching out and kind of like turning a sphere or something, right? Is that how your
like
digital twin
AR, you're
works?
talking about?
I'm not sure. I like
Well,
clip
the other
art.
thing with digital, well, yeah, I'm not going to get too much into it because I'm going to get confused. So we'll just say, well, if you don't know, then I'm not going to tell you.
That's right. They
You
always come in.
obviously don't get it, and I don't want to waste my time explaining it
I
to
mean,
you.
I think the big question is like, well, what if you've got reality and a simulation? There's your digital twin, right? But what if you have multiple simulations? Is that a twin? Like, because a twin
Triplets,
implies that then you got a digital
quadruplets,
quadruplet. Like, I think it. So, I
octuplets.
think whoever came up with that notion needs to maybe work on that and
Yeah, I mean, and they
see.
tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and all of a sudden you've got a patchwork of multiple identical factories or whatever it might be.
I actually used a little video of that recently in a presentation. I told
Which
two
one? The
friends. I think it's Perel. I forget the name of the shampoo.
See
But
how well it worked. But yeah, no, I think that is a classic that people will remember, and then it keeps.
yeah, I think I was talking
The
to a young.
technology to create one of those back then probably wasn't was probably pretty top of the line.
Oh yeah, it
Now
was.
you could do it on any XPS 13
Yeah.
developer edition.
Now the one. So you were a little while ago. Like you were making me think of. So you have the 10-year time span to return to our theme, right? And like I feel like there have probably been several stages of let's call it the answer to why are we doing this, right? And I think as far as like doing kind of like internal innovation, right? Because this is something that was done inside of Dell as a new product, not like acquired and not just sort of like copying other stuff or just doing industry standard stuff.
And it
So
wasn't part of a new product introduction
right,
path.
right, and so it just kind of came like so at the beginning, like to start you off, you just have sort of like, well, this is like part of a program to do new projects, right? And then after that, there was basically just a lot of showing up and convincing people and like lining up like various people to like be behind it to support it. And then like you said, there's like a 3-year mark where like it could or could not go away. And now it seems like now like you don't really have to like prove that it should exist. Like it's
You have to
fine.
prove it less. I think, with in any large company, you're always battling for resources, even ones that have come along on the official path. Um, and I think I do a talk, I've given it on 5 lessons learned on driving innovation in a large company. And one of them is get a champion, be a champion. So back when we started out, Namdi, who was, as I said, Michael Dell's chief of staff, was the person at the high level who was talking if things needed to happen between high level people to get support. But that didn't always trickle down. And so you had to be in there selling, constantly selling the idea of getting people enthused about this, explaining why this is important, and getting them on board. And the team itself was pretty small, and we use a lot of people. We borrow a lot of folks, and then you have to get, as I say, with the larger Dell machine, you need to get people excited about this and willing to take that part through the normal process. So it's constant selling. As definitely not as much now as it was before, but for all projects, you're trying to keep getting resources for it and to take it bigger if you can.
So see there's an interesting little insight is that the let's say you need to have let's call it a lowercase t-shaped sort of like plan of championing, right? Like
With lower
so,
T shape, you got me
well,
lost.
a lowercase t, right? So you might have like an executive level, right? Like
Mhm.
your executive champion, and they're trying to convince their peers, right? So that's the top of the T. right? And then, of course, that champion also needs to like motivate their bosses so they go up, like that little short part of the T, right? But then I think the part that is most difficult is that, like, even if all that executive layer is aligned, you've got to, like, and it's not like a intentionally pejorative, it's just the way letters work. You've got to go like down into the organization and like talk like way below to all these different groups and kind of like explore and figure out what's going on there, because it's like, even though you might have a mandate to like innovate and do new things, you need the whole organization to be behind it and supporting it, because it's always easy, as you were kind of pointing out, it's always easy to find a reason not to do something. People are very, in an organization, optimized to argue why they
Well,
shouldn't
I
do
mean,
something.
oftentimes people have, say, four things they need to do, but
Exactly.
they're asked to do a fifth one, and then you come in and say, "Here's number six, please." And so it's, you don't want to just say, "Well, it's, they just don't want to play." It's
Sure,
they've
sure.
got a
Right,
lot
right,
on their
right, right.
plate as well, and you need
Right,
to
right.
convince them that, you know what, this one's actually kind of important. It's going to be more fun than that other thing. So
Right, and that's the optimistic Barton way to put it, which I think is great.
yes.
But so see, there is like, I'm curious, like, over time. So at the beginning, you have basically most of your success, and maybe I'm speaking broadly here, but it feels like most of the success you have with like a skunkworks thing or whatever you want to call it, an internal innovation thing, is really based on having a pretty high level executive supporting you, right? And then also, whether it's that person doing it or the team of people or an individual doing it, just going to all these different groups that are involved and need to support it, and basically more or less starting from zero each time, convincing those groups that they should be excited about this and take the extra effort to do it, or prioritize things appropriately, right? I
And I
mean,
think that's the real say challenging part, is to every time get up there and meet a new group that hasn't heard of this, and it's something that's not necessarily something that they think about or are familiar with. You have to be selling it. And so, as I said, you got to get a champion, be a champion. And if you don't mind me using a war analogy, it's sort of the air war and uh, the ground war and the air cover, right? So the other person is coming in, the executive, with the air cover, but that's not going to win the war by itself. You also have to be there on the ground, and same is true. And so also with you working up at the executive level, you get those people nod their head and say, yes, my people will help work on this. The signal kind of gets lost. So if you think of the ocean, right up top, there's a lot of light, and as it gets down, it gets darker and darker and darker, and that signal gets lost. So you got to be down there at the bottom with the fish with their, the light bulbs on their heads and things like that.
the
And
anglers.
you got to be helping there. So there really is sort of a both levels, and one is not going to survive without the other.
So then how does that like change over time? Like at the midpoint, like the 4 or 5 year point. Like, is it still like exactly the same, or is it less of that? Are there new types of things you have to do to basically keep the project alive and thriving? Like, what is it like gardening in the middle, the midpoint?
I think one of the things that, we talked about, what has helped it survive, and it goes back to that original goal, which is, let's help to change um, what you call it, perspectives and how people view Dell. It's about the coverage that we get. And so
All
we
right.
get a lot of great coverage, and more importantly, coverage in publications or areas that we wouldn't normally get in Dell. And so that's a good way that you can point to, hey, we're in these publications that we previously would not have been written about in, um, and this would be picked up as an innovation story. And it's always good for companies to say, hey, we're not just producing great products, but we're also innovating to keep new products coming up and to
Mhm.
stay current. So those kinds of proof points have also helped quite a bit. So the more you get those under your belt, as I say, revenue is great, and that has been growing. But at the same time, being able to point to, here's all the articles that have been published. And so there's the executives will get a daily roundup of, here's some top articles written about Dell. And so if you get a few in there, it keeps it top of mind.
So that's interesting. So to summarize, at the beginning, you're basically just going like, group to group to launch things and keep it alive for a while, right? And then eventually, like it's self-sustaining in that you're not just losing a ton of money, right? Like
The
it
good thing
actually,
is we never lost a ton of
right,
money,
right,
which
right.
to our
No,
surprise, or I shouldn't
no,
say to our
and
surprise, but
that's also a nice thing about hardware is it's pretty quick to figure out if you're going to make money or not, right? I don't really know anything about the hardware business, but the
well, let's
point
just
being
say,
the point being that it's like an okay to healthy business, right? And then to your point, like as you're saying, like 3 or 4 years later, just like as things way out of your control happen, like what becomes important then is that there is not only visibility about the project, right? That like people know about it, like they would know the name of it, and maybe even like be able to tell you why it exists. But then that you have this sort of ongoing proof or validation that in the case of this, like we're not just selling another type of laptop, right? But we are reaching a new type of audience or person or customer or area that we just like wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. So now people know about this thing. It isn't just some weird speculative thing that's annoying. It's kind of part of the system. But not only that, like it has something unique about it. Like it gives us a unique strategic position that if we didn't have this thing, we wouldn't have that strategic position, right?
right.
And
But I think you constantly have to sell it because unlike say a Power Edge generation, whatever we're in at the time, that is part of the overall portfolio, and you don't need to remind people that that's there. Something like a developer edition, you really need to keep the drumbeat up and keep feeding the articles, keep talking about it. So you constantly have to be selling. It's easier because the people closest to it now do support it, but you want to keep that visibility up, not just externally but internally as well. And that's really important. I mean, it's like some actor who's a big deal, but all of a sudden you haven't seen him or her in any movies, and you think, well, whatever happened to them? And yeah, maybe they're doing things and they're on Broadway, but you didn't know that. Or now they're producing great movies, but so you have to keep that going. If
so
that
as you,
analogy works
as
for you.
as you keep bringing me back to, maybe this is another statement about this internal innovation thing, is that you will always need to be advocating for it and internally marketing for it. Like that probably will never go away. And so you
And
always
to
and because you know that you'll always need to be doing that, that should be part of your like strategic planning, right? So not only are we planning like what features should we have in here, like how could we run this better as far as a business process, but part of the strategic planning, at least annually, if not like more, is probably like, all right, and we need to improve and build on the stories that we have that we only use internally, that shows people why this is valuable and convinces them that it should, not only stay alive but get more attention, right? And like,
Yeah, and ours wasn't so. It hadn't been so. What shall I say? Process included. I don't know the right word, but it was sort of scrambling and just realizing we had to keep this up, and keep it going. And it just gets back to the fact that you can do well externally, but if you don't keep things top of mind internally, people forget about it, and then you start losing resources. And so that's back to that. You got to keep up the messaging internally. Like I said, unless you're Power Edge line, storage lines, it's going to be something that you really need to keep going. Now, it's also less investment, so it's not as you're not quite as you're not taking up so much resources that people would question as much as they would once you get to a certain level. But constantly showing its benefit ensures survival to
right.
the best that anything is ever survives forever. So
So
as
so
long as
then
you're
so then you're like let's finish the thing here. So we had the beginning, at the midpoint, and then you have like the 10 years later point, right? So what are different things about how you like keep that innovation alive when it's like now a decade old? Like, I assume you still need to do a lot of internal marketing and advocating, as you were just saying, right? So that always stays there. But like, what are different things as far as like taking care of it and making sure that the, I mean, to call it a project is a little funny, right? Because it's not really a project anymore.
Right. But it sounds quaint. So no, it's and in reality, we do need to start talking about it as our developer portfolio. It's not a project. That makes it sound as if it's something that's not quite baked or may go away. I think actually it has gone on rails for a little while now, meaning in a good way. And I'm not talking Ruby, but I've stepped away to work on the developer strategy, and then now am Dell's community manager overall. And so it has continued to work. We had built up a big enough foundation with community support um, that it has continued on without me having to champion it at every step. Now where we're at is, as I said, this greater recognition of the importance of developers within the context of DevOps makes us realize that, hey, let's take that project portfolio, as we're now saying, and let us connect that with our into bigger initiatives that we're working on, so that it's not just a great point product, but it's part of a bigger solution and part of our overall message when we come to customers and say, hey, we can support you in your DevOps needs, we can support your developers, we can support your operations, and here's the overall set of offerings that we have and skills. And I think, as I mentioned, we're now looking to not revitalize, I should say, extend it even further. And that's why we're doing the brainstorming and thinking, hey, we've got a good thing here, but it could do so much more if we were to add a little bit here, a little bit there. So let's think of some things that we might want to include in it. And then that helps the overall business. And I think one of the things you have at big companies often is you have groups that think more about how they work within themselves, but maybe not across to another group. And the more that you can look at it as one company, and systems and solutions come from all different parts, the better off you'll be. And I think that's in this case, that's one of the things that we're doing. And we've looked for ways in the past to connect that with the big backend systems, and we've had some success. But I think this is now, as I said, becoming re-energized, or not re-energized, but taking further as part of this overall movement to better serve customers on their DevOps journey.
So here's let me suggest maybe names for these three stages here, because you know me, I love to develop a model or a system around things. And so first,
a framework.
I think I went to school with
a lexicon,
a rubric. Yeah, that's right. And so I think the first one is just the survive phase. Like you have an idea, and of course there's the bootstrap phase, but you just like, once you get it off the ground, you just got to like survive and like keep people caring about it and alive, and that involves obviously a lot of this is where my failed lowercase t analogy comes in.
Yeah, that didn't work for me. I was trying to picture it and I got confused.
We'll take that one back to the workshop and figure it out.
I would call that the ever vigilant, sleep with one eye open, keep championing until you can't champion no more stage, where you're spinning the plates and you're doing it by hand. There's not like a motor to spin them.
I think we're going to need a big sheet of paper for that phrase. It might not fit on the slide title. And then in the middle, you have kind of like this sustain part of the life cycle, which is like you reach a certain amount of like whatever the strategic value is, revenue or revenue and profit or whatever. And it's sort of like people are like, oh yeah, this is a real business, and we've been doing it for several years, so let's just keep doing it. And then it seems like there you have two major concerns. One is like you want to just grow it more, so you always want more revenue to get bigger. And then two, it's not so much that you've got to like be scrappy and like survive, but you have to make sure that people are aware that the project, the thing, is good and important, right? Like kind of like don't let people forget about it, and at the main time that you're growing it. And then the last part you were talking about is almost like you've become institutionalized. Like you're just part of the system. And then at that point, I mean, I don't know if we can generalize from what you were saying about how, you would like to do the following at any phase of the life, but you then should fit pretty obviously into large organization strategies, right? Like you
Hmm.
should be, and that's what it is to be institutionalized, is that like we have like three big strategies that we're doing, and this thing is one of, fits very strongly into one of those three strategies, right? Like for someone like Dell, laptops are institutionalized. I'm, I don't know, maybe there is, but I would bet there's not a meeting every year to justify the existence of the laptop category, right? It's
Not so
probably,
much.
yeah, it's
No.
probably like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing that next year, right? And
Yes.
like, that's the ultimate institutionalization, is that the laptop category just like is not going to go away, right?
It is right, but I think within that portfolio, you're always looking at where should we be going to better serve the customers? Which ones
Right.
we got a limited number of resources, want to best serve our customers. Maybe this line at this point now doesn't make as much sense if as opposed to if we put more resources behind this line because that's where the market's going, where people are looking for more support. And so I think everything is always subject to change, and nothing is ever completely safe. But at the same time, some products are safer than others, big product lines. But it's even when you get going, there's always that chance you're not. It's not so much a random out of the blue one person or one group will torpedo it, but it could be, hey, we're now going to be putting more resources here, so we'll wind this down.
Right, right. Yeah. And also, just like you're saying, there could be not resource allocations, like resource priority changes. But I think, thinking about it more with you, right? Like I think it's once you are more institutionalized, it's almost like an internal job that people maybe don't appreciate very much, is that you now need to think about how your product can help the high level strategy of the company as a whole, not just help itself, so to speak, right? Or even just help its market. So like, I mean, I don't know if this is the case, but to draw out my rambling here, like if you have the developer laptop, like for the first, through the sustaining part of its life, it's just sort of like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it's just like serving itself. Like it's serving itself and its customers. But once you become institutionalized, then one of your top priorities becomes like, well, how does this help the company as a whole achieve what it wants to achieve? Not just
It
what
becomes
what
part of a bigger solution, right? So even though
right.
it you can say it aligns with this value of innovation, or it align to some part of the company's larger framework, but how does it not just align with it at one point, but becomes part of this broader solution? So if you think of it of and if I remember my geometry right, so you get in the beginning you're scrambling to keep it alive, your plate's spinning, and then you get to a slope of one, right, where it's just sort of going and it's going up, and that's good. But how to take it from a slope of one to, and I can't remember which number would be bigger than the other, but to take it and start having it go up, then you really do need it part of a bigger solution, because that gives you more resources, it gives you more, whether that's people selling it, whether it's explaining it to customers, whether it's making customers of the community aware of it. All of that helps to take it and to grow it.
Yep. All right. Well, here's what I'm gonna do in the show notes, Barton. A couple of things.
Tell
One,
me,
I think maybe one of the first videos you made about this. I think we might have been. This might have even been in Portland when we were at some open source conference. I forget, but it says 10 years ago.
we announced it at OSCON when we said, well, we didn't announce it. We announced that we were going. We said, okay, this is now going to be a real project. We've got enough
I think
support
I think
internally.
that's like the only O'Reilly conference I ever spoke at.
Really,
they never
what were
accept.
you speaking about?
Well, you and I had like some panel about innovation or something. Like
We were on the Cube, I think.
no, we had a talk. We definitely. I should go look
Okay.
that up. But, anyways, and then I found another video that we didn't talk about this part. There isn't time of it, but I think I was responsible with this part. I had this idea that we should have these profiles, like pre-configured things that would run on there. And we spent a lot of time on that. And I had a video with my friend Charles who was working on that. We're in front of a whiteboard. I'll have to put that there as well, so you can see like there's something that thankfully was cut out very early on, major distraction, but it goes
Well,
to
yeah, I mean, I think
your
to that,
lead.
I saw that you sent that over, and there were two things that we thought would be big value adds on top of just having a laptop that worked running Ubuntu. One was the cloud launcher, which was Mark Shuttleworth's idea, saying, hey, it's great to stand alone, but what you're going to get value from is if you can develop in micro clouds on your laptop and using Lexi and push it up to the cloud. So that will be the cloud launcher. And then, as you said, you had this idea, which you'd heard about from this Pivotal Labs company, and how
Yes.
they put together software stacks that you could pull down and be ready to go from day one. So there was the profile, I forget, the profile tool, I guess is what we called it, in the cloud launcher,
Yep.
and both turned out to be really hard. And there was the difficulty of that, plus the fact that what people got most excited about was a laptop that worked. And so we didn't, I remember there was one gentleman from France who kept asking every so often, checking in, seeing how it was going. But other than that, there really weren't people clamoring for it. And so the other thing, fortuitously, this thing Docker came around, and that was that sort of idea that we were talking about, the cloud launcher. That made that easy. So that was solved with us not having to do anything. And then when we actually stopped doing our own work on the cloud launcher or the profile tool, nobody said anything. So that's the thing. Again, you have these ideas of what you think are going to really add value to the product, and we're going to make developers' life so easy. And yeah, if we could have done it with, in 2 weeks, we would have done it. But I think one thing in general is there was such a pent up demand for this that people were very happy just to get a laptop that worked. And that's really what they wanted. In fact, another thing too, I don't know if you remember, is we had a whole curated set of tools and utilities that we put together on the
Mm.
system. So we thought these would be the ones that people most want to use. People really didn't care about that. They were going to go and pull down what they wanted. So once again, something that we thought would add value turned out really not to be something that people cared that much about.
Yep.
So those are some learnings that sometimes the innovative part isn't the part that you think it is.
Yeah, yeah. No, you get to find out and evolve it, which is always nice. Well, so where can people purchase one of these things, Barton? Where would they go?
So we'll have to put it in the show notes. I think because we changed the vanity URL. I think it's now Dell.com/Linux systems, where we have the whole lineup of them. I don't remember if there's a dash between. I think there's a dash between, but let's put that in the show notes or you can put it over here.
Or
So
you
that
could probably just search for like Dell developer laptop, right?
yeah.
That
I think
probably
that, I
works.
mean, to talk about something that's been a constant, something we've been getting better at, but it's been tough as its lifetime, is being able to find the systems on the website. And I think that's been something we've heard a lot about. And it still happens every now and again. But we're very aware of it. And that's something obviously it doesn't help our customers and it doesn't help us. They want to buy something, we want to sell something. And so we've been working on it. And I think this page is a great step in that direction, where you go and you can see it all laid out there, as opposed to searching. But as you say, if you were to put at this point, if you were to put XPS 13 Developer Edition in, odds are you'd get to where you want to be.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a great. 10 years is nice. It's been going on forever.
We look at it as the first 10 years.
That's right. It is the first 10 years, and all you need is some free consulting. You just need to make some TikTok videos, and people will find it. Barton, have you?
I think so. Dancing with your daughter and talking about Sputnik or that kind of thing.
Dancing with the laptop. All right. Well, that was good stuff. And if you want to get the all those show notes you mentioned, you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com and just search for Barton. He's been a guest several times, and you can find a link to this episode or look around for it. It'll be there. And with that, you want to say goodbye to everyone, Barton?
All right, everybody, take care. Have a great evening, morning, night, twilight zone. Thanks for listening, and check us out. And thank you, Cote.
Sure. It's always fun to talk. All right. Bye bye.
All right, take care.